Tonight on Cosmic Cantina, we're traveling through the multiverse. Ever wanted to quit that crappy timeline you're in and jump into a new one where your life is awesome? Us too! That's why we looked into stories of people traversing the multiverse, both willing and not. We also interview a quantum physics expert to really scramble your brain and make you say, whoa! So smoke 'em if you got 'em, because things are about to get weird. I'm your host, Melissa Tittle, and every week I go to my favorite bar, Cosmic Cantina, and kick back with my co-hosts, Josh Golombeski and Matt O'Connor. We talk about aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts, ancient cultures, and anything from the unseen world that needs a little illumination. Welcome to Cosmic Cantina. I'm your host, Melissa Tittle, and tonight I'm drinking some booch because
the booch.
I don't feel like drinking. Lame. What do you guys got?
Well, first of all, I want to say you guys are welcome. You're welcome for telling you to invest in cryptocurrency. The market is on fire. But tonight, I am drinking Strange Beast. Again, she's my second love. She's no ghost fish, but you know what? She sticks around and she doesn't, ignore my calls. Matthew?
She's attentive.
What are you drinking?
She's very attentive. Look, I got some warm Corona because I forgot to put it in the fridge last night, and because it's the morning, I added a lime to it just to help. It helped a little, but that's
nice.
Them's the breaks, guys.
You're a hero.
Sometimes you gotta
man.
suffer for your art.
Corona's got to be like exotic in Australia, right? Corona, exotic beer.
It is.
Well, we're going to talk about multiverses, time travel, jumping timelines, all that kind of stuff. I interview somebody who dabbles in the quantum physics world, and he has been dealing with this for quite some time. He has a show on Gaia, and he also has an organization where he helps people stay in their right timeline. Ooh, what does that mean? What do you guys got?
Well, I jumped into a classic little book called Time Storms by awesome investigator and author Jenny Randalls from the UK.
Right on.
She's kind of compiled a bunch of stories of people who have slipped in and out of time warps, rifts in space and time, and like a little bit of time travel and stuff. Just all sorts of bizarre experiences from people, and I like her stuff. It's good times.
Cool.
So that's where I'm going.
Josh, what do you got?
Very interesting, Matt. Well, tonight I started researching into this weird phenomenon where people will suddenly die through an accident and then be in a different timeline in the moments leading up to their death. And it sparked a childhood memory of my own that I want to share that connects it all together and gives this whole kind of thing more validity than just random stories on the internet.
I think that was
Nice.
a dig. I think that was a dig, Matt. Anyway. Yeah.
Creepy
those fan
pasta.
stories on the internet.
You'll keep Golombeski. You'll keep, buddy.
Cheers, down under.
All right. So, of course, you know me. I'm going to go into some articles. But I wanted to talk about what we've all been thinking about, or maybe some of us, people may be listening to this podcast. Is time speeding up? Are we jumping to the 4D, the 5D? Are we on a different timeline? What's happening in the world? Is somebody controlling our timeline? These are all things that I've heard, especially in this space. And I just found a BBC article, which of course doesn't answer any of these, but it does have a psychological answer.
Which is a complete waste of everyone's time, but we're going to talk about it anyway. No, I'm kidding.
Let's speculate.
Right, exactly. So, it's a little boring, but we'll get to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So this article's titled, Why Time Seems to Be Going Faster While We Are in Lockdown. The blurring of identical days leads us to create fewer new memories, which is crucial to our sense of time perception. Memories are one of the ways that we judge how much time has passed. So, for instance, we probably all remember the day when wherever country we were in, we heard about the virus, and then our country went into lockdown. We remember that because, it was a very significant memory in our minds. And psychologists call these moments flashbulb moments, memories, and they're common when we hear about a really huge event. But because of the lack of other memories in between the big one, this idea that this is when we heard that we were in lockdown, to today, it's as if time sped up or it didn't even exist because we have no new memories because, it's living in day-to-day type of stuff. We're not on vacation. We're not, traveling around the world. I just thought that was interesting because the next articles that I'm about to read talk about the multiverse and quantum physics and, what would happen if we went back in time. But each of one of them talk about the present moment being the most important. So it's kind of interesting that this boring article, it talks about, hey, no, time's not speeding up. You just don't have any memories. That's why you just don't think it exists. Just interesting to think about in this podcast as we go forward. So because we're covering so many ideas of time, because there's just so many concepts of what's happening in the world besides political markers and that kind of thing, just the idea of time, I'm covering a lot of them in these articles. So this is actually an article based on an interview on Closer to the Truth. Eternal chaotic inflation, which generates multiple universe, builds from the theory of cosmic inflation originated by physicist Alan Guth at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. If you didn't know that, that's a little backstory on Multiverse. Ooh. As physicist and Nobel laureate Steven Weinberg told Closer to Truth, the word universe, I suppose, should probably mean the whole thing, everything. But when we think of the universe, we sometimes use the word to mean just our idea of the Big Bang, the things we can see out to almost 14 billion light years in all directions. And in this manner, it's reasonable to question, is our universe unique? Are there multiple Big Bangs? Could there be multiple Big Bangs in different senses? So, a Russian-American physicist, now he's at Stanford, Andrei Lindy.
Yeah. He's a Russian. I'm in. The story is going to be awesome. Whatever happens next, it's going to be aggressive and awesome.
There's going to be Bigfoot, aliens, it's some weird portal. All
and
right.
an RPG. It's going to be epic.
Okay. So he says, we started calling this the multiverse, meaning the entire ensemble of all these regions of disconnected space and time. So basically, these scientists are asking themselves these questions, and they're like, okay, let's just call it the multiverse, because they really don't know. He developed the theory of eternal chaotic inflation, which generates an ever-increasing number of universes without end. Scientists created the multiverse, Lindy continued, because we found that what we had called the universe can be divided into extremely large regions, which may have different laws of physics, and one part may be suitable for life and other parts unsuitable. Great. And I'm sure all of these questions will be answered in the new Doctor Strange movie, Multiverse of Madness.
Oh, yes.
Obviously. Yeah.
Obviously. Speculation wildly. Yes.
Marvel Comics answering all the big questions of the universe.
Right. We're talking about jumping timelines. We're talking about multiverses, parallel universes existing at one time, and are they interacting and all that kind of stuff. But then the idea of time travel, which is, everybody likes to talk about time travel. It's fun, right? What if you could go back in time? So a Forbes article written by a quantum physicist titled, Would Traveling Back in Time Destroy the Universe? And I'm only going through this because it kind of builds on what they were saying with the multiverse theory, just a little bit. Okay, so this is what the article says. If we were to somehow trace back the entire history of every particle in the universe, we would find that there wasn't a particular path and set of interactions that each one experienced. Many of the processes in our universe are random, including at a fundamental quantum mechanical level. Their outcomes are inherently uncertain, unpredictable. In quantum physics, all we can compute are the probabilities of outcomes, not any certain outcome itself.
What does that mean?
It just means that, like, there isn't a set course. So if you're trying to go back in time, it's could you there's a couple theories, right? You could affect the future, or the other concept is that the future has already been predicted and so has the past, and you actually, by going back to change it, it's already been predicted that you would go back to change it. I know it gets super complicated, but all of the chaos and
paradox.
The randomness of just even a particular particle in the universe, it seems to be predictable but unpredictable and chaotic at the same time. But what it concludes in this article is what is true today is a result of what happens in the past, and that the record is already written, sort of, It's what we do in the present that truly counts for the future. You might be still confused. So
My brain hurts.
well, I'm going to make it hurt some more because
All right.
I'm going to go to an interview with Randy Weitenheimer. He's the CEO of founder of Creative Energetic Health, host of Quantum Effect on Gaia TV, president of a corporation called Spacelift. He is the CEO founder of 10 Sons Martial Arts Masterclass. He's also the CEO and founder of Native American Pharmaceuticals, and he's an author, lecturer, and artist. He knows some stuff. So here's the interview.
All right, so let's jump right in. A very popular term that has graced the internet, especially for the last couple of years, and it seems to be a hot topic for a lot of sci-fi writers, is the multiverse. But what is the multiverse?
It's very interesting. People use language without the definition or the knowledge behind it. Okay. So to skip around a little bit, reality and the way I describe it is about, say, 23 intersections, which we'll describe as dimensions. Okay. That comprises our verse. Okay. Singular verse. When you get into the multiverse, you're starting to talk about other dimensional existences or locales or domains. There's lots of language for it if you go back through history. There's domains, there's kingdoms, and all of them are describing a different verse that we have been interactive with. And so when they talk about multiverse, they're talking about our ability to interact with another verse. Very simple. And if you can interact with several of those, then it becomes a multiverse. For most people, that isn't true. They only operate in this number one reality, which we've talked about on Gaia. So when you look at it that way, one of the languages I use is that all multiverse interactions are internal. It's very hard for us to exist in another dimension or another universe that has different dimensions than this one, but we can visit there through our consciousness. So an internal landscape would allow you to participate in different verses around the universe. And then we go into what's your repertoire. Do you have one or two or three or four or five? Eventually we get to multi. So people that like at night dream, we could say that's a whole different universe. It is. It's the astral universe is one language. But then we could say, well, there's another one out there and we can call it the Pleiadians or we can call it other things. And they have their own set of dimensions which create their reality. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when we visit and interact with those, a lot of times the cross information flows are not either accurate or complete because we're dealing with unknowns. It's very simple.
So you're basically what you're saying is that there's possibly 23 dimensions just within our verse.
Right. Yeah.
And
exactly.
that there could be 23 other dimensions in another verse and so on.
Or 15 or 30 or 40.
Whatever because the game is.
Yeah, because the physics changes. When you start introducing more intersections or dimensions, then you're going to change the overall or overriding physics or underlying physics is one way to look at it. And that becomes an area that's like worth a lot of exploration. It's like, how is it that some people can interact what we call across universes or across dimensions, across lifetimes? All of those could be considered, again, an internal landscape where you're able to go there, okay? And for different reasons, through practices, training, knocks on the head, high fevers, we find ourselves not exactly in this one. And, the old language, we find ourselves out of sorts. We don't find ourselves out of sorts. We find ourselves somewhere else.
Mm. So the idea of a multiverse, you're in one verse. Can that other verse with its different dimensional qualities communicate with your verse? Is there a way to do that?
Yes, to some degree. And this is where an intuitive person, obviously, or somebody who's aware, I teach it as awareness, but the more aware you become, the more aware you become of that which is not here. That's one way to look at it. And even there, that's bad language because it is here. There's no distance between verses. That would be the best language, right? We do that to kind of keep it sorted out in our head, but there's really no distance when you go to sleep at night and get into an astral type world or universe, you didn't go very far. It seems like you're a long ways away when you come back, like when we come out of a dream state. If you watch people that are intuitives or people that channel or communicate, they literally are somewhere else while they're doing that. Okay. They're bilocated with their consciousness. So bilocation, okay, so now you have a two-way conversation. Think about having a three-way, okay, or a four-way or a five-way. Now you're dimensionally or verse communicative, right? But if we bring it back to Earth, it's like a horse shares certain dimensions with humans, and there's a certain amount of communication that can go on. Now we have horse whispers and kangaroo whispers, I guess. But you see, it's like dogs, we share some. Cats, we share some dimensionalities with. Why wouldn't we share with other consciousnesses or other humans or other species that are in the universe? Well, there has to be some shared dimensionality. Otherwise, there's no communication. And that's why I love when people say, oh, I talk to aliens. Well, can you talk to horses, dogs, and cats? You can probably talk to aliens. You see what I mean? Or we'll just say another species and another verse out there in the world.
Interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So behind you, it says X timelines.
Yeah.
So let's try to merge the idea of the multiverse with another popular thing that seems to be gracing the presence of the internet and what people are talking about, and that is timelines. Timelines are jumping. We're fastly approaching 4D, 5D, and the timelines are changing. What does that all mean? I'm just repeating what I've heard. I don't have any evidence of any of that, of course, but explain to us the jumping of timelines and what that means within our own dimensional qualities.
Okay. I'm starting X timelines as a way to be able to explain all this, and look forward to presenting some episodes to the public. Timelines are very interesting. Everything is a timeline. And if we go to quantum physics, we talk about wave functions and collapse of the wave function. So they're kind of tied together. So for instance, if you go through life and at some point you get married, and let's say you divorce, what happened? We would say that when you got married, you diverted from your original timeline. And then if you got divorced, you snap back or have the potential to snap back to that original timeline. It's also like you graduated high school and wanted to be a microbiologist or something. And then you went and did all these other things, but maybe at 50 years old, snap back, and now you're back on your timeline. You go get your degree and you're doing something you really wanted to do. And we go, what the heck was that in between? Okay. So Dr. David Hawkins said the path is narrow and the path is straight, but we tend to deviate from it all the time. So when we deviate from our timeline, the only thing that brings us back usually is pain. It's very interesting. It takes pain to bring us back to that which we are, which is being ourselves. And of course, that's what I work on for people to be themselves. So timelines are very interesting. You started one when you're born. It already automatically and without interruption basically comes down to the end, and it's finished. You collapse the timeline of Randy or Melissa or whoever. You collapse the timeline with a job. You start it, like people call me and I say, well, that person will only work there 3 months or 9 months or 5 years because the timeline expires. And in quantum physics, we say it collapses. But the thing I find fascinating and wanted to talk about is that there's a lot of unknowns there. Like, I don't know why I took that job or why I married that person. And I don't know why it ended. I can give you logical or reason or emotional substance, but actually there's a lot more at play. And that gets into back to multiverses and different dimensions and all kinds of things. All those are at play in a timeline. We just tend to take one little part of it when we say, well, I quit my job because I quit, the relationship ended because. And so when we're able to look at that a little more in expansive or exploring that, we tend to come up with better answers and better information for us to act on.
So directly, how do the timelines that we're experiencing deal within the idea or the concept of multiverse?
The singular nature of ours does not recognize the multiverse. So when things happen in ours that we can't explain, we just say we can't explain it rather than be able to go out and explore where that information, where that interference, and what I call person, place, or thing is doing it. We're interactive across multiverses. That's what it amounts to. But everybody says, oh, well, it's just this world, this reality. No, we're not just multidimensional creatures, we're multiverse creatures. And it's something that, again, it's popular because very rarely have people ever talked about it. And when they did, nobody had an understanding of what we just described. And once you recognize you're interactive, now we get into all the psychic training or occult training or spiritual training, just whichever way you want to look at it, of people who have done that and have some kind of rules or methods for doing that exploration.
There is a lot of fear that humanity is on this timeline, and for some reason, because of all the political and pandemic type stuff that's been happening, that the timelines are switching really fast. Do you agree with that statement, or is there a different way to look at that?
No one person particularly influences the entire timeline. We could say there's a timeline of a person, there's a timeline of a place, there's a timeline of a thing, right? Mm-hmm. And the political or whatever environment bursts, it's a combination of everybody on the planet, basically. So now we get into the entire consciousness, our collective consciousness of ourselves. Now, are we under the influence? The answer is yes, all the time. Everybody and the entire group of humanity and everything else is under the influence. So this is where, again, you have to have an internal landscape and the ability to go exploring to see what the implications of all that are. So just what I call the sky is falling, which is kind of what we see a lot of now, is it may be true, but it may not be true here. Okay, it may be true, but it may not be completely true. And that's how come we get so much diversity in the language that's applied to our current political and religious situations, whatever. So what's true for you, I call that a local reality, local dimensional interactions are very set. So the people in LA are one way, people in New York, we could say they're all different, but it just reflects the amount of energy and information coming into that geographic area. And so that becomes a determinant. So this is a very expansive conversation that we'd have to get into. Right?
Oh, this is it. You're gonna have to, everybody, you're gonna have to check out his podcast, which is launching soon. We'll give you all that information on our website. But this was really interesting, and I know that you can go on and on about it. But just so we can leave people with something, should people be afraid of how things are switching so fast, or should they be spending more time trying to figure out what timeline they're on and be perfecting that?
Exactly. If you work on your own timeline, we call that being yourself, being healthy, being energetic, being available, all those things. The strength of that is what you deal with other timelines with. If you're weak in all that, if you're not yourself, you don't have any energy, then other timelines are able to override yours. And we see that a lot. What is the major component of anything that overrides your timeline and your being yourself is fear. And we see a lot of that right now. So we say the strength of yourself. The strength of yourself is what you're required to work on. And the stronger you are, the less likely you give into or are affected by what other people think or what other people fear. And right now, that seems to be the major operative field that people are experiencing. So,
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Randy. I hope to hear from you soon. I'm sure we'll bring you back to talk about more exciting timelines, space travel, weird stuff.
yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Excellent. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you again.
Isn't that crazy? There could be like 23 dimensions in one universe, and then there's another universe that could be 9 dimensions. You can't even keep track of it if you're trying to relate all these multiverses.
It's some heady stuff for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my small pea-sized brain struggles to keep up, but I get the gist of it. And this whole conversation, the research into this really sparked something in me. Like, once he started talking about how, like, a fever, that stuck with me at first. Like, what do you mean a fever can unlock another timeline? Or if you get hit on the head, something hard, it can unlock a different timeline. So not just about you, like, being a better person and making yourself healthy and being positive and keeping yourself on the right timeline. This is like a sudden departure from it. And I was like, why is that sticking with me? Why is that sticking with me? And I started researching these stories of these people who were suddenly hit by like a car. A car is a lot of them. Like, a car accident is a lot of these stories. Or just a sudden accident that jumps them back in time and into like what seems like a different timeline now, where things are subtly different. And the reason why I was really fired up about this, because most of these stories are just unverified internet creepy pasta stories. Matt O'Connor's favorite dish to serve.
Yeah, Matt
love it.
O'Connor. Yeah.
I found
Love
credence with it because let me tell you my story quick. It's the quickest and it's not as fun as the other quick ones I'm going to tell, but this is the gist of it. I didn't have every attribute of these stories, which I'll get into in a second, but this is all that happened. I was in my hometown at my mom and my grandmother's farmhouse, my mom lives in now. There's a big barn in the back that has a window really high up, like 30, 40 feet. And we climbed up there with my cousin from my dad's side, who wasn't related to me on my mom's side, who lives up the street. It's a small town. You had to be careful who you dated. But we were hanging out upstairs.
Could be your
and
cousin.
The window, it could be your cousin. You got to be like, is it at least third? Because anything over third is fine. Anything below third is not okay. That's what I learned living in the woods. So,
interesting.
yeah, there was this window, and below the window, there was all these rocks, like 30, 40 feet down. Usually it's just like, there was just this entryway into the barn where you could just drive a tractor in. But for some reason, they were rebuilding stone walls, which is a huge thing in my hometown where I grew up in Little Compton, Rhode Island, for the new listeners. I'm from Rhodey. And there was all these rocks strewn out. And I slipped and fell. And I remember vividly the rocks rushing up to my face, and then snap. I just remember a noise and blackness for a split second, and all of a sudden I was just looking up at my cousin who was holding on to my arm. He like grabbed me before I fell, and I was halfway out and pulled me back in. It is a memory that was weirdly haunting when I was younger. Totally forgot about it, like totally, until today. I was like, what? So that led me down a path to see, okay, have other people experienced this? Like, how common is this? And as I researched more stories, it came up. So these are the commonalities in this, and this is what's really weird about it. One, people report, this didn't happen to me, but a lot of people report coming out of their body, like, in a death experience where you launch out of your body and you see yourself. 2, entering a void or a blackness for either a split second, like maybe I did, or a certain period of time. A blinding white light and a sucking sound coming back, and suddenly you're just there. There's no blink, or there's like a flash of a light, and then you're just back in reality before you died. Not like right before, like a movie, but like a couple minutes or a couple seconds, or it's generally close. And those are the common characteristics of all these stories. There's other ones too I just want to point out that are really interesting, is sometimes things are slightly different, or something that happened in that physical reality does transfer to the next, but the event didn't happen. I'll get to that, what that means in a second. Groups of people have also experienced this over and over again, going off a ledge in a car. Everyone in the car will remember it, but they'll all snap back to reality. And sometimes people's bodies will still hurt.
I have a question. So with your story, you remember hitting the rocks, but then all of a sudden you came to and you didn't hit the rocks because your cousin grabbed you.
Yeah, so the moment I hit the rocks, I suddenly was staring up at my cousin who was holding me outside the window. So I never like felt pain. As soon as I hit, I snapped. Now, my story, I don't remember anything. That's all I remember. It's very vague. I wouldn't even put much, I wouldn't report this to the Paranormal Reporting Center if it ever existed. Like, I don't know. It's not like, it's like seeing a light in the sky and be like, is that a UFO? I don't know. It's like one of those stories. But it did spark
the PRC.
Yeah, right? So, but these stories, I'm going to go over quick, are just really small, like a paragraph, and they just show more details of what happened. So this is a classic one from a guy who posted, his name is Bilgus. Bilgus. That's his like handle. And this
Okay.
is just like this is a great one of just a quick road one. So a guy was late for work. It was winter. He was racing early morning, and it was snowing like crazy out. He was going about 45. He was going 70. There's a truck going 45. The truck passes him, and and then suddenly starts sliding. He slams on his brakes over black ice. And then it's another common characteristic. Time goes in slow motion. Suddenly everything seems really slow, which is also common when like extreme things are happening. So maybe it's not related. And then all of a sudden, boom, he popped out of his body and was above the car and watched his car slam into the truck and clearly kill him. All of a sudden, he was horrified. He all he remembers is a void. He doesn't know how long he was there. When I say void, that's just a human word to describe where he was. Darkness. It wasn't bad or good. He was just somewhere. And then, boom, he was in his car driving way before that truck came close to him. And he was able just to get in the left lane. And then the same event happened where the truck slid in the same way, but he didn't hit it.
Whoa.
He was like, okay, well, what does that mean? So at the end of it, he writes,
Interesting.
that experience
Wow.
really made me begin to question reality. Is it real? Is it an illusion? Why are we experiencing this illusion? This will get to my point in the end of what I kind of think is going on. I'm going to tell one little quick story, and then I'll give you my overall thesis, my thesis statement. Professor Josh is out. Doesn't even have his glasses on.
Yeah.
So this
come on,
one's a little
where's your
darker. It's a suicide story.
It's probably not even wearing pants.
Trigger alert for the people out there.
Gross.
So this
He's trying to be serious, Matt. He's trying to be serious.
No, it's all right. What do you say?
I'm sorry.
I missed it.
I'm listening. I said you're probably not even wearing pants, but go, Professor Josh, lay it on me.
We'll just leave it. I'll just. So
Just checking.
I'm just not gonna answer.
Just
Not gonna
checking.
answer. I did find this one story I wanted to tell where it was really good, but it was clearly fake. And for some reason, like they described all the characters in it, and one character, like he just kept calling him fat for no reason in the story. And it was like a story about fat shaming that ended up in them all dying and then like coming back to life. But then him being fat had nothing to do with it. And I was like, I'm not going to tell a fat shaming like everyone dies story. So I picked this one instead. Okay, guys.
Wow. Heavy. Heavy in
It's
all
weird. It's
senses.
just like fat shaming his
like,
friend,
what?
and then he's like, and then we all died. And I was like, why were you calling him fat the whole story? It was just weird. Anyways.
Wait, what's happened? I think we jumped a timeline. What podcast are we on?
You got my
Who are we
joke.
talking about?
Gotcha. Okay, so this one is from Throwaway Kai, and this is why I wanted to tell this one too quickly. Basically, these events also can change people's lives. So there's a guy, and I want to tell the story because I had OCD as a kid, and it touched me a little bit. So when this kid was 15, he had extreme OCD and anxiety, and he was suicidal. He waited for his parents to leave the house. He knew where his dad kept a gun. He got the gun. He got all dressed up like people do when they sometimes commit suicide, a nice suit, combed his hair, did all the morbid things that are uncomfortable, showered, got into his bed, took the gun out, was listening to Free Falling, started crying like crazy, and then pulled the trigger. The next thing he remembers is he was floating above his body, and he had a profound sense of like, I did something wrong, first of all. Same situation. Again, all these stories, these are just two I'm going to tell. All of them, it's the same thing. I was floating above my body. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I'm in a void, and I snapped back too. And he snapped back down to the bed, holding the gun in his hand. He didn't kill himself. He ended up crying that whole night and then really changing his life afterwards. So why are all these stories... And there's another story I saw that was awesome about a couple who got stabbed to death, and they both remember it. And at the end of it...
Oh, that does sound awesome.
Yeah, and they at the end of it, they were really, really, really horrified and confused. And it's a long story, but I don't want to tell that story. What I want to say is this. Remember when a few podcasts ago, like it was probably 10 or 20 ago, we researched NPCs? There was this doctor I came across, and this doctor talked about how sometimes non-player characters are like, if we all live in a simulation, some people aren't really experiencing consciousness like we are, but sometimes when people experience extreme trauma, they leave their bodies, because in the context of a simulation, if we're all here to grow and learn, and we created this multiverse to learn and grow in, then there's no point at some point to experience a certain level of trauma. So they get taken out of their bodies until the body calms down and put back in their consciousness. They leave to a different timeline maybe, or they come right back to that timeline. That same concept seemed interesting to me for this, because it's like these people aren't supposed to die. Like, what does an accidental death help anyone with? It doesn't help the person dying. Maybe there's a lesson for the people around that person to learn, that maybe there's some sort of growth opportunity there. But for the person who actually got into an accident, there's no, what's the point? Like, what did you learn? You learned nothing. To accidentally get killed out of nowhere is like horrendous. So what it seems like is happening is a system where the simulation's like, oops, we all have free will. Things happen. We're trying to control everything, but we can't. So we're just going to put you into a different timeline where you continue living your life. And when that happens, sometimes, like me, maybe, and these other people, they remember for a split second. They're like, well, that was weird. That just happened. I mean, some people report like even their body hurting and other physical characteristics. So that's my theory. I'm gonna end this with just one line from one guy, one comment I found on the internet, and he just said, "This life is such a total mind fuck. It really is." And I was like, yeah, it really is.
Cheers to that.
Yeah.
Cheers to that.
It's like we're not supposed to fully understand.
I'll
It's
drink to
too
that.
complicated. Right?
It goes back to some of the articles that I was bringing up in the early part of this podcast, which is a lot of quantum physicists are saying, look, what we can't understand is the present moment. And that you can go back in time and you can analyze it, but what you'll always know is the present moment, and the present moment depicts your next time frame.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
What
interesting.
it reminded me
Because-
of what you were talking about, Josh. It reminded me of if you subscribe to the idea of this being like a simulation, a holographic universe kind of thing. It almost is like a computer game where you just get an extra life all of a sudden, you know. And some people obviously don't have that extra life, and some people like yourself maybe are just
Right.
for whatever reason are given an extra chance, put into a different time. I don't know.
Randy said, like, all the idea of the multiverse is that all those universe and all those dimensions are actually communicating with each other. So if you think about how complicated that it is, if you're just thinking about your life and that your life has jumped all these timelines, can you imagine? Like, you just think about all the emotions and the thoughts you have during the day. Have you ever thought maybe that they're intersecting with all the dimensions within all the multiverses all at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know how they say like
I need less thoughts.
yeah.
Less multiverses.
That little mouse in my head going around the wheel is just constantly
The
spinning.
monkey brain is no good for me.
Yeah. But you know how they say like, and I'll bring it back to aliens here for a second. How we have these encounters. We talked about it, Melissa. You talked about it after like big events, like like a atom bomb going off. You know, because and there's all these reports of abductees saying that it affects their dimension, it affects their timeline or whatever. This huge explosion, whether it's the energy coming off that or whether it's the death and the emotional impact that has on the collective consciousness that ripples throughout other timelines or whatever. I don't know. That kind of would make sense then in this same case but on an individual level, where your huge emotional impact of you dying kind of has ripples that affect other timelines, I guess, you know?
Oh.
Anyway,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
something
I
to
like
think
that.
about, guys.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
throwing it out there.
I like that.
Whew. We're gonna have to do some drugs on this podcast just to get
Yeah,
through this
I'm gonna need a
multiverse
shot.
conversation, because it just gets more complicated. But before we jump to Matt, I just want to say, Josh, thank you for sharing your story. I mean, that is it's crazy, because as simple as your story is, in my mind, I'm literally analyzing it. I'm like, wow, okay, so it happened, but it didn't happen. I understand what you're saying, but it's like I want to understand how it didn't happen, right?
Yeah, like where am I? Do you mean like what timeline? Am I in a new timeline? Is this a different
Right, like,
Josh?
Yeah, like
well, no,
just
it's no
all the
same
things that
Josh. Different reality?
Aw. I guess.
Yeah,
so.
it's like your consciousness jumped to a different, and you combined with a different conscious. I don't know. My
Well, can I
head's
just say something
doing
positive quick
an
before you
ellipse
go
right
on,
now.
Matt? Have you guys ever heard of quantum jumping?
Yeah.
It's like a meditation technique where you meditate and encounter yourself in different timelines being successful in something you want to be successful at, and you ask them questions, right? I feel like I did that technique, and to end this a little heartwarming instead of just darkness, is I feel like that technique got me here, got me to Colorado, to Gaia, and to this podcast. So I just want to say it could be good and bad, and it's mostly good, right?
So you
Thanks-
created
thanks,
a
successful
new
Josh.
present moment. You created a new present moment. The whole
In
idea
a
that
positive
quantum
way.
physicists say that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Instead of
Like the most
almost
important
dying
moment is
and
the
then getting
present
forced
moment.
into another one. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it can be each way. So Anyways, that's what I like to believe.
Well, I
Nice.
love your positive spin, Mr. Butt Probe. All right, Matt, take us down a dark path.
The darkness. All right. It's time storms, guys. Do we know what a time storm is?
No.
It's a lot of things. So, well, I'll link to this book. It's super fun book, fascinating book by Jenny Randalls, as I said to begin with. The book, the full title is Time Storms: Amazing Evidence for Time Warps, Space Rifts, and Time Travel. It's from 2001. And I really love Jenny Randall's stuff. She was the one who coined the phrase "the Oz factor," to describe that disorientating silence that sort of precedes paranormal experiences.
Cool.
Yeah.
And she's really like a fact-based kind of researcher. Like her approach to investigations is to like interview and find the facts rather than just kind of listen to any old story that comes through. So actually in the 90s she spoke out about this overtly sensationalist approach that was sort of starting to edge its way into the UFO paranormal phenomena sort of scene. And it was kind of beginning to kind of poison the well. She sort of noticed it, and she actually quit as head of investigations at the British UFO Research Association. She was the head researcher there for a long time, but she just saw this like sensationalist craziness sort of popping its head up and not going away. Obviously, this field hasn't exactly dialed back the crazy since then, but
Nope. Not at all.
it
went into fourth gear.
It certainly
Went into
did.
4D. That's what happened.
Fun time to be alive. All right. So, time storms. So basically, this was her investigating. Various people had experienced these bizarre lapses in time and space, missing time, or who seemingly have just popped in and out of random time periods, which is super interesting as well. I found a number of different. I tried to get the book, but I accidentally had it sent to the States, so I wasn't able to dig. But I found like snippets of it online, so I was able to kind of dig through a little bit. So I apologize if I didn't find the most craziest stories, but I got some good ones. All right.
Woo!
So let's get into some examples of what shit that happens, and you'll see like similarities popping up. And actually, I noticed that with a couple of stories that you were talking about, Josh, I did notice some similarities popping up there too. So here we go. So here's a good one. So this happened in Chile, 1977, and this was Corporal Armando Valdez. Suave gentleman, I'm sure. Good.
Congrats.
He's good with the ladies.
On that
he
name.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited. So he was the man in charge of this like little training exercise of these new recruits, and they did this like camp out in the middle of the desert wilderness kind of area. And so they had this camp set up, and they were all sleeping. It was the middle of the night, and they had one of the recruits on guard duty. His name was Pedro. So he noticed at like 3:50 a.m. Something really odd in the distance, and he woke up the Commander Valdez, and he came immediately, and they both saw what appeared to be two fuzzy violet lights that were kind of descending from the mountains and heading their way.
Okay.
And they said the ground below them was beginning to fill with this like eerie glow, this kind of mist that had this odd glow to it. And this is something that pops up again and again in these stories, this odd glowing mist, I guess, or bright lights. And you can definitely argue that these have alien abduction traits to them, obviously, as well. But so here we go. So unsure of what these flares, if these were flares being used to sort of mask an attack that was coming. Valdez quickly ordered the men to screen the campfire they had going with some blankets, like put out the fire, and told them to grab their guns, ready your weapons, man. Shit's about to go down. And he decided to go out and sort of do a little recon. So he goes out into the darkness and sort of marches towards these lights. So then, by now there was just these two lights sort of combined into one big fuzzy glow that was sitting on the hill a few hundred yards away from him, and it sat there like just hovering basically for a few minutes. And so, like I said, Valdez like marches out into the darkness. So he heads out into the darkness towards this purple glow. And they said the recruits saw him walk into the darkness, and obviously they lost him because it was so dark out. There was no like moon or anything at the time. And they couldn't see him anymore. He just like sort of went into the darkness, and moments later, this glow disappears as well. So they sit there in silence, waiting for 15 minutes, waiting for this commander to return. And they wondering what the hell they're going to do. 15 minutes goes by, and then Valdez returns. But something is clearly awry now, because he's returned from behind them, the different direction than he left.
Whoa.
Uh-oh.
So somehow he's done a full circle around them.
Maybe it was a joke.
And he's
like, haha.
yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. Suck that, bitches.
You
yeah, so
idiots.
it was like a hazing. But so get this, so he was in bad shape. So the startled soldiers saw him wandering as if in a trance and speaking in a low voice that sounded like that of a sleepwalker. So it was like this monotone voice. And he was saying over and over again this one sentence: "You do not know who we are or where we come from. You do not know who we are or where we come from." Just over and over in this monotone voice.
What?
Later, after he kind of came out of this like little trance, he doesn't remember saying any of this. He doesn't remember anything that happened. He collapsed soon after this and was unconscious. And so after this, the men call in for help. They sort of sit with him and sort of care for him as best they could, try and like put a pillow under his head. I don't know what you do in these abduction situations. But it was then that they noticed several very strange things about their stricken leader. Here's what it says. Although they had seen him shave only hours earlier during the day, he was now sporting several days of growth on his beard. His watch had stopped at about 4:30 a.m., the approximate time of when he returned to camp. But the date on display was read the 30th of April. So this was 5 days after he had supposedly left, but he came back 15 minutes after that. So somehow he'd been gone for 5 days somewhere, and then returned 15 minutes later when in this reality, which is bizarre, obviously, to say the least.
Yeah.
So according to Jenny Randall's, army commanders did actually confirm this incident took place, said it was inexplicable. They had no answers. And they said when Valdez regained consciousness, he appeared to be in a state of shock, massive memory loss, and no proper body coordination. He was just a mess. We've all had nights like that. But later he described his lost minutes or days as a void in his mind. Like it was like it was erased.
Ooh.
It was darkness.
That's
there.
what
He
Josh
used the
was
word
saying.
void.
He did. He used the word void. A dark void, yeah.
So did he
So then-
remember, kind of like Josh, the moment before he didn't remember? You know? Like that moment that he was doing something, but then something else happened?
It sounds like he doesn't remember a lot of that stuff. He doesn't remember anything that happened with this. Like he physically came back 5 days later, but it was only 15 minutes to the people around. So, but he doesn't remember any of that time. It doesn't say whether he remembers walking out into the field or anything, but he doesn't remember anything of what happened to him. He just walked out, and then 15 minutes later came back, but for him it was like days, and he was muttering that odd sentence, which I thought was really crazy too.
It's really crazy.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting that these are alien abductions, right? This is an alien abduction situation that messed with his timeline.
I don't know what caused it. And obviously Jenny doesn't speculate either as to what caused it as well. But it does have those similarities, like lights sort of floating around. I guess you could say they were UFOs. But bright lights kind of turn up again and again. But this sort of mist as well turns up when these people sort of go missing for a little bit and come back moments later. Okay, so the next one I have is just kind of a quick little tale that kind of reinforces this idea of this mist, this strange white glowing mist that kind of it's not always white; it's all different colors. But so this happened in Brazil in '81, and this was from a fella named George Ramos.
Ramos.
He was traveling home from work. Ramos. So he was traveling home from work at about 6 p.m. And it's only a few miles from his home, so not real long, maybe 10 minutes. But he never arrived. Police find his Volkswagen, his car, on the side of the road. I don't know why I specified Volkswagen, but facts, guys, facts. So it was on the side of the road, just a few miles from his home. So he's almost home. Key was still in the ignition, and all his business stuff and all his personal effects, all in the car still. So whatever happened to him, he didn't take any of his stuff with him. Police couldn't find what happened to him or where he went. But then 5 days later, his wife received this frantic call from George. He reappeared. So he said that while driving his car, it suddenly drove through this strange white glowing mist, after which he found himself in a dreamy, floaty state.
Oh, he remembers.
It just kind of reminded me of, so he remembers all this. So do you remember that story I told of these guys who were driving and their car is kind of taken over and it just starts driving into this red place, another
This
planet
other
kind of
dimension.
thing that was red? So that kind of thing pops up again and again too. There's a story not long after this of a guy on a motorbike, and he was getting overtaken by a Jaguar, another car, and not a real Jaguar, a car. And then and then they both drive into this mist and come out the other side, and they're missing like an hour or something like that. But it was the same thing, whereas when they drove through the mist, it was like something was propelling their vehicles, even though they both report that the electrics in the car, everything stopped, and they couldn't do anything. Nothing was working, but their car was still traveling at the same speed in which they started off. And then they had all this missing time as well. So this guy, George, he tells this story of when he came to after being in this floaty, dreamy state, and he was just on the side of the road, just like in a daze, walking on some unfamiliar road that he didn't know where he was. He waved down a car and like asked for help. To his shock, it was 5 days later from when he left, and he was 600 miles away from his house. Yeah. Again, 5 days, yeah. So the last one that I have is pretty fun because it has footage. We all love footage, guys. The only footage I could find of this, I remember seeing this a while ago. You guys may have even seen it before. But the only footage I found was from some cheesy, like, paranormal investigative with... what's his name? The guy from Star Trek Next Generation? Frakes, whatever his name is. Jonathan Frakes.
Who?
Oh, yeah.
Jonathan Frakes, the actor.
So are we supposed to...
paranormal, like...
Are we watching?
Lieutenant.
So here's the footage. This is from security footage. CC security footage was sent to investigators from a supposed security guard who worked at this factory. And apparently this factory is in Florida. This is also in Jenny Randall's book. So he sent this with a note that basically explained what happened. This security guard was watching the footage. Normal night. It was in the middle of the night for some reason. And again, I don't know what this factory does that it needs, 24-hour surveillance from a security guard and has all these monitors and video streams going up. Are they defense contractors? I don't know. I'm speculating here, but it seems like a pretty interesting factory. But here's what happens. So you'll notice, and the cheesy voice narration will guide you through what you'll see in the video. But this guy, one of the workers, he's at the back of the factory near one of the big roller doors, like that leads in one of the delivery sort of doors. This huge white flash just engulfs the screen, and it actually sort of shorts out the cameras for a while. And then this guy's gone. He just disappears. 2 hours later, after watching the footage, and the security guard's like, what the fuck was that? And I think he goes and has a look and comes back and couldn't find anything. 2 hours later, he's sitting watching the footage again, wondering what he should do. A second flash, sort of, you see this, it's a real split-second thing you see on the video, but it's like a circle of light appears, and you see this guy's form within the circle of light reappear. He's on all fours, completely disoriented. He pukes on the ground, like he's just like been on the gravitron. Like it's just something horrible has happened to him, obviously, and it's just scrambled him. So he pukes all over the ground and then sort of stands up in a daze and kind of wanders off. And so according to Jenny Randles in the book, this is what she said: the security guard, seeing the worker staggering about in a disoriented way, went to go help him. The stunned man could recall nothing of the ordeal. He had a 2-hour gap missing in his memory, and in total shock, he went home and reported the next day that he was too sick to work. He never returned to the factory. Shortly afterwards, the videotape was thoroughly examined by scientists and computer analysts, and I think they were probably on this show too, you'll see, who concluded that this was genuine footage.
Wow.
I don't know.
That's crazy.
Check it out. See what you think.
Randy was talking about how, because I asked him, what about all these 23 dimensions and in each universe, and then the parallel universes and all this stuff, right? I'm like, do they interact? And he said they do. They do have intersections where somehow you are interacting with all these verses or universes all at the same time, right? I wonder if this idea of like the haze, the fog, the flash, like maybe that is a moment of intersection with another verse.
Yeah, it's like an opening portal or something
or
like that. Window.
I think this is more like willful opening of something. So something can control that.
This seems directed.
Yeah, it's like
Right.
one thing is like understanding the multiverse and it being accidentally falling into it. This feels like someone's manipulating the multiverse.
Yeah. Did you guys check out the footage?
Yeah, I've seen it before. I've seen this before. Yeah, it's good footage.
Yeah, I figured you had. Yeah, this is classic. I couldn't find it forever and just randomly found this little snippet of this show.
Cool.
No, it's good.
Pretty
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
No,
Yeah, it's
definitely.
legit. It's
And
legit.
so I think there's just a lot of scientific study going on about this. Obviously, everybody's talking about it. It's in the mainstream now. Quantum physicists are debating like what they don't know. Maybe it's part of this idea of a multiverse, time travel. What is time to each of us as humans? What is this experience? Is it a simulated universe? Like all of these things are really being studied, and it's awesome. We have a video because we get to actually see for ourselves, like what is this? It's just weird. So I know that we probably didn't answer any of your questions on time, but we gave you more to think about. So the next time you're going to talk about multiverses and all that stuff, you need to get yourself some weed and you need to talk about it, because I swear to God, it'll make a lot more sense than just having a beer.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be high.
You got to be high, because then it makes sense. All right. Until next time, take care of yourself. Don't fall into another multiverse, and make sure your timeline includes Cosmic Cantina. And we'll see you next week.
Peace out.
Goodbye.